Hi everybody, my name is Robin Widener. I'm so excited to be here with you today to talk about Formed by Grace, the Redemption of Chaos. I want to thank Gilma for inviting me, and I want you to know, although I'm not there with you in person, I am with you there in heart. And the funny thing is, as you're listening to this, then I will also be at a retreat up in the mountains of Idaho. So I'm retreating while you're retreating. So there you go. Or maybe I'm in two places at once. So I'm hoping today that as you watch these videos that I have to share with you, that you'll picture me there with you, loving you through this offering today. You know, we live in a world of amazing beauty, of breathtaking beauty, but yet there is chaos in this world. And many times what I've seen is the chaos is in direct proportion to the beauty. So I think of three of the most glorious states, and one of them I have to say is Idaho. Idaho is just covered by scenic drives and glorious mountains. But just recently I discovered what makes the state so beautiful is that the whole state is undergirded by a system of volcanoes. And many of you may have heard that Yellowstone, in fact, they've discovered this ginormous, maybe 50-mile pit of lava underneath Yellowstone. If that blows, the whole state's going. So we have beauty, but we have chaos. I think of Alaska. I just recently went to Alaska, and I had the privilege there of seeing some of the most spectacular country in the world, just gorgeous. And as you're flying in, you're wondering, where are we going to land? Because it's so many mountains and bodies of water and so much glory. But one thing about Alaska is it's dangerous. And my host had to warn me about a lot of things. And one thing I was really glad they warned me about is something called mudflats. And because I'm a water girl, I really like to walk along the edge of the water. So as we were driving along the coast, you see this spectacular looking beach and mountains and in the sound. And I just wanted to go down there and walk. But luckily they had warned me, because there's something down there called a mudflat. And that's when silt from glaciers are carried into the sea. So what happens is you could be walking along the mudflat and your foot could get stuck. And then they have these crazy tides that come rushing in. And actually there was a woman who went out there walking, got her foot stuck, because when the silt goes around your ankle, it can become like concrete. And even the National Guard couldn't extract her before the tide rushed in, and she drowned, sadly. Glory and chaos. But thirdly, I think of California. And I know you girls have a beautiful state. In fact, whenever I go there, it kind of takes my breath away with the stunning mountains and the ocean, just the access to the ocean, the canyons, spectacular. And I happen to think that, I think it's Highway 1 along the ocean is one of the most beautiful drives in the U.S., no doubt. But I was looking on Bankrate.com today, and according to them, California is the second most dangerous state to live in the U.S. As they say, California has weathered wildfires, landslides, flooding, winter storms, severe freezes, and tsunami waves. But earthquakes are the disaster most associated with the nation's most populous state. The chaos and the beauty go together. The most beautiful places in the world are also chaotic. So my question for you as we're thinking about Shaped by Grace today is this: is Christianity any different? You know, I love your title, Shaped by Grace. And in that, I hear a God who shapes us. And I also hear grace as being a kind of safety net that allows us to submit to His work. And as I thought about this, I realized that I had recently given a presentation a couple months back in Hampton Roads that speaks to your topic. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to listen to that lesson in 2 parts, broken up by discussion groups where you're going to get a chance to process all of this together. So let's listen in to part 1. Beauty and chaos. In the first part of our time together, we talked about how beauty and chaos go together, and how the idea of tohu vabohu, the great void, the great chaos that the Spirit of God was hovering over, forms the basis for the whole idea of God's creation and his creative work in our own lives. And we also talked about this idea of asthenia. And I know you didn't get that written down because you don't know how to spell it, but don't worry, it'll be on your handouts for your group. Asthenia is the idea in the Greek of weakness, which means being without strength. So in other words, I can't do what I like. I feel held back by weakness in my life. That weakness tends to blow up on me and create new problems. And it means that I start to depend on things that I have absolutely no control over. How frustrating. But into this whole thing comes the idea of God and his ability to use our weakness, and that we have a great high priest who understands our weakness. And because of that, he calls us to the deep places. He wants to come within us and look underneath our weakness, look underneath our pain, and understand he is not intimidated by any of it. He wants to work with us, and that's what we're going to be talking about in the second part of our lesson. And we're going to learn more what it means to be shaped by God. But first, I'd like you to, in your groups, do some soul searching and look at weakness in a new light. And what did this mean to you? Learning about tohu vabohu, and how do you feel like God is beginning to change your whole idea of chaos? So divide up into groups and have a great discussion, and I'll see you in just a moment. Formed by grace, the redemption of chaos. How are you feeling, sisters? How's this been for you? I hope that this message has gone to the deep places and brought up things maybe you haven't thought of, or thought of them in different ways. We are made of naught but clay. And today we learned that that is pelos, mud. We're made of mud, but in the mud is such beauty. All of life and all of loss and all of joy and all of hurt is wrapped up in that clay. And God, the master potter, wants to put that clay on his potter's wheel and do something magnificent. So you may ask, where's the grace in all of this? And I think the grace are the hands that form us. God's hands are the grace. Because we have a potter who won't let us fly off the wheel. He won't press harder than we can withstand. He won't hurt us or damage us in some way by his work on us, on the potter's wheel. You see, we do that, don't we? We try to put our own hand in the potter's wheel and control it, or we try to hold back God from pressing on certain parts of us because we're afraid. And when we do that, we're at risk. We're at risk of medicating, of trying to deal with our stuff and our missteps and our hurt and our tohu vabohu and our asthenia. We're at risk of working that all out through medicating, through eating, through immorality, through romance, TV, romance books, romance stuff, through negativity. I'll just yell at the weakness and everyone else's weakness while I'm at it. Or gossip. I hate weakness, and if I call out your weakness, maybe I won't feel so weak. We're tempted to do all that, and God's answer is so simple. My daughter, come to the potter's wheel. Come to me. Remember Romans 9:19 through 21. On the contrary, who are you, O sister, to answer back to God? The thing molded will not say to the molder, why did you make me like this? Why this, God? Why this situation? Does not the potter have a right over the clay to make from the same lump one vessel for common use and another for one vessel for honorable use, that is, and another for common use. And I think sometimes we've got it backwards. We think that the vessel for honorable use is being married. And I would say that's the more common use. Whereas in being unmarried, and certainly you're not alone. So single is almost a weird word because it has that connotation that you're alone, and you're not alone. In fact, you have special opportunities and special gifts because of your life circumstance. So I see the honorable gift there, the honorable gift of being devoted to God in a special way without all the confusion of trying to please a husband, which I do love being married. But some of my loneliest times have been in marriage. And so when Paul talked about the gift of singlehood, he used the word charis, C-H-A-R-I-S, charis, which is a grace that's given for special circumstances. And so whatever your circumstance is, you can trust the potter because he has just the grace that you need, just the grace that is needed for whatever you're going through. So it's time to put ourselves on the potter's wheel. Now, for some of you, this is scary. I know it is because maybe you haven't been there for a while, or maybe you've let a crust come on the outside of the clay because you were afraid, because there's stuff in there that you're not even sure if it's spiritual to go there. Or maybe you've been told it's not spiritual to go there. But we've learned today that God wants to take us there, I believe. He wants to take us there. So after my lesson in Hampton Roads, the resident potter came up and she told me, you know, Robin, there's one other thing. She's like, there is a way to rehydrate clay when it gets crusty. I was happy to hear that. So I looked it up on YouTube, and what you have to do to rehydrate clay is you take the block of dry clay and you stab some holes in it, and then you need a big, kind of a heavy-duty bag. You put the clay in it, fill it up with water, and then you need to tie that baby tight. Then you're going to get a bucket that's bigger than that block of clay, fill it partially with water, and put the bag that's sealed full of clay and filled with water, so the clay is surrounded by water. Now you're going to put it within that bath of water. And you may ask, why the double water? It's because in order to be rehydrated, the clay needs pressure. And that outside water in the bucket forces the inside water to work its way back into the clay. So the clay can be pliable again and moldable and usable in the master's hands. And here I see the sovereignty and power of our God. And I think of Paul's words. He says, we were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not only rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. And that's in 2 Corinthians 1, in verse 8 and 9. You see, pressure is part of God's plan. Pressure, right? Instead of repressing, he presses on the clay to let those air bubbles come out and to use them and integrate them as a perfect artist into our story. He uses pressure to rehydrate us when we get crusty and we need some fresh water in there so that we can be moldable again and so he can do his work in our lives. You know, I feel joy in doing this for you because I sense that God has some amazing things he wants to do with your lives. Some very great work he wants to do. But now it's time for you to come together and talk. And think about, how do I mess with all of this? How do I get my hands in the middle of the pottery? Or even, have I even been on the wheel? And what am I afraid of bringing to the wheel? And how do I see this all in a new way? And what grace is involved? How is God wanting to form me? And what new vision for my life can come out of all this? I can't wait to hear the answers to those questions. In fact, I've asked Gilma, perhaps she could have you write down some things for me and send them so that I can understand and pray for you and support you in your journey. So sisters, it's been a pleasure to be with you. And now it's time for your groups. So I pray that you have a great discussion about how to be formed by grace. Thank you for having me.